So I want to take a look now at the effects of a tariff on domestic consumers. The most basic issue is that the price is going to tend to increase. So we have a world price of $100. That's the free trade price. And let's say after the imposition of the tariff, that the new domestic price is $110. That is to say that there's been a tariff of $10 in the case of a small country, so that the small country's consumers face the full brunt of that tariff. So, most importantly, at this new price, you go over to the demand curve, and what you see is that the total amount of domestic consumption is going to fall for this good because of the higher price. There are going to be some consumers that are going to say $100, anything over $100 is too much, they won't buy the product. But now let's take a look at two aspects of these effects. Now, generally speaking, the loss in consumer surplus is defined by the area between the difference in the price over to the demand curve. So the total consumer surplus loss is MN. Now, each of these two areas have a very clear interpretation, which is useful to try and link what we're talking about here to the real world. So let's take a look at this quantity Q4. Now, these are consumers that were buying this product before, when the price was $100, and they continue to buy this product at $110. So Q4 are consumers that have stayed in the market despite the fact that the price has gone up. In other words, M is the increased cost to the consumers that stay in the market after the tariff. So what these consumers paid under free trade was this box here, price times quantity. Now, there were other consumers beyond that, but let's focus on these particular consumers. So this is how much they paid beforehand. They now pay the new price times this same quantity, which includes M as an additional cost. So M is the loss of consumer surplus for consumers who stay in the market. So some consumers are going to say, well, I'm not happy about the higher price, but I'm willing to continue to buy this product. N has a very different type of consumer. This is associated with the consumers that have left this market. They used to be willing to buy this product at the lower price. They paid this amount to foreigners for this imported product, and the total consumer benefit that they received was the area under the demand curve. So N was consumer surplus associated with consumers who were able to buy at $100 and were willing to pay more. Now, after the imposition of the tariff, that consumer surplus is gone. That is to say, N represents the impact of consumers who were priced out of this market, who were unwilling to buy it at that price. So N is the loss of consumer surplus for those priced out of the market. Now, it's tempting for many people to think about the consumers in these cases as final consumers. Somebody walks into a store and buys a shirt and has to face a tariff because of government policy. Many times, the consumers that we're talking about here are actually industrial consumers. Let's say this is the importation of a raw material, say oil or steel or some other product that is used in another industry. If that's the case, if this is a product of that type, this M&N, this consumer surplus loss, are losses to the firms and workers that are in the industries that use this imported input. And this is a very important aspect of trade policy, because many times the tariffs, certainly in the United States, but in other countries as well, are placed not on the final product, but on the intermediate product. So, for example, if there's a tax on the importation of steel, well, most people don't go out and buy a ton of steel on a Saturday afternoon. Instead, the users of steel, the purchasers of steel, the consumers of steel, are industrial firms that are making appliances, automobiles, so forth. And so in those cases, M&N need to be interpreted not as a burden on final consumers, but instead on the firms and the workers who are in the industries where those prices have gone up. And that's a very important part of the effects of tariffs, because they increase the cost of this imported good, whoever ends up buying the product. So once again, the basic analysis of this that's depicted here shows the two components of consumer surplus loss associated with the tariff. One, M, which is the burden on consumers who continue to buy the product despite the higher price. So that's one aspect of consumer surplus. And N is the consumer surplus loss to consumers who are priced out of the market altogether.